Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Wow, look at all them people.
Zoom always gives me the notification of like you are being recorded, and I'm just like, when am I not though? Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, this is no different from my daily life. I don't know.
I was like, if it's not Zoom, it's a vMix call. If it's not a vMix call, it's probably the NSA. So,
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's at least the NSA, if nobody else. So
I say that like any of my intel is actually valuable.
Stomping grounds.
Hello, everybody.
Stomping ground. Oh no, headshot truck.
Hey, y'all. I am Trevor with the University of Washington. I'm one of the admins there, and we're here to kind of just talk about Broadcasting 101. We have assembled a core group of movers and shakers in the Pac-U Gaming communities, and who will drop some knowledge on you all and answer your questions and give you viewpoints on how to get started in broadcast, how to get involved in broadcast, and just generally kind of learn more about the world of broadcast and esports. A couple of pieces of housekeeping. We are recording it for future purposes, so just be aware if you're on screen, you are. And also, if you're not actually speaking, please,
it was a screw.
if you can. And
I know the screws are over here. I must have got pushed in.
hold on, I need a mute somewhere.
I got you. We good.
So, all right. So, without further ado, we'll let the panelists kind of kick this off and start talking. Feel free to put questions in chat, and just generally reach out if you have a question or we're not getting something you want us to talk about. Thank you again for coming out. We really appreciate this. This is the first time we've done this. Look for more opportunities moving forward. Just keep on Discord. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to start more? I was thinking, given the nature of this, that since Sam is the one that keeps all the computers stuck in his room, that it might be more his field to start this one off. Does that make sense, Sam?
Sure. I mean, I'm down to just do this for like background stuff. Like I know you were talking about it. Like what's the word I'm talking about? Like 5 minutes ago, we were talking about like literally just our backstories.
Yeah.
I'm down to give like brief introductions, and then we can go through backstories. You want to do it alphabetical order? So we go Avi, and then you, and then me.
Sure.
And we'll just keep that up for any kind of questions and stuff too.
Surprise, Abby. Boom.
Does anything come before AB? That was kind of funny. Okay.
AA.
AA does. This is true. Hi, my name is Abby Sherlock. I am a second-year master's student at the University of Southern California in their Interactive Media Game Design program. I was a community coordinator at TESPA, working on community programs for collegiate esports. I have done internships at NZXT, Geek and Sundry, Legendary Entertainment, and La Jolla Playhouse. I basically, for Pac-U, I am doing a lot of like the talent coordination, so working with our casters and assembling the crew that go for broadcasts.
All right. I am Gabriel Del Rosario. I am a junior in broadcast production at Washington State University. I do broadcast directing alongside Aria over there. And what we do for both WSU and to a lesser extent Pac-U is the management of the broadcast personnel, or at least I do a lot of the personnel, and Arya does a lot of the technical stuff. And in the Pac-U, I work as the one of the Overwatch casters. So showing up each week and just giving the play-by-play commentary over the top of whatever Overwatch match we have going on at the time.
Nice. Hi guys, my name is Sam Morris. I've had about 5 years in collegiate esports. I think it's boiled down to. Almost every single one of those has been in college, unfortunately. One day I will finish, and one day I will get out of here. But life goes on. Do not be discouraged, and keep on grinding through college. But my history includes doing tournament admin stuff for TESPA, and then I became a graphic designer for TESPA. I worked there for about 3 years. Got an internship at Blizzard. Almost took the full dive and dropped out of college and went for Blizzard. Very glad I did not do that in hindsight. And then from there, I've done work for like Twitch for graphic design, and helped found Pac-G, which was the first iteration of Pac-U about 2 years ago, and helped do all the broadcast stuff for that. Helped found University of Utah's the first Power 5 varsity esports program, all that fun stuff. And then last but not least, I now run and operate my own company, Space Productions, and we do full service broadcast production. Some of our notable gigs include PAX Online, their Ignition Series event way back, and I think that's almost 3 months ago now. The Ignition Series event with a whole bunch of top tier teams, and yeah, we saved a bunch of panels. We did MomoCon Online, all that good stuff.
I guess I can go. All your boys, WSU computer science major. Like work with Gabe, just handling more of the technical aspects of our broadcast production. I'm always the one producing and technically also observing our matches in game. I probably have a lot more years here, which I'm glad to be here now of all times. Get things off the ground.
You ready for Zoom University for the next year or two?
Yeah, it's been fun.
Excited.
I don't have to go outside at least.
It's true. True. Cool. Do we just want to go around and I guess we talked our histories. What's next? What do we want to talk about? This is kind of impromptu for all y'all that are hanging around. If you guys have any questions, make sure to drop them in chat. We'd love to know what you guys are thinking about in terms of what you're interested in learning. We can talk anything from talent management, observing, babysitting computers, what it looks like for broadcast, anything and above we can talk about and go into more detail.
I was gonna say, why don't we start with how we managed to broadcast everything remotely, because that's
Cool.
a bit of craziness in its own right, as you know.
Yeah, I can go into some of the tech for that real fast. But I just want to drive home too. There's a lot more than just tech that goes into broadcasting. I would honestly say the hardest part of broadcasting is staffing everything, because building full 5 to 10 man crews for a constant show week in, week out is insanely difficult. And Abby can hit on more of some of the difficulties. I can go into that. Do you have anything you want to hit on that for when you worked at like Critical Role and what you've been doing for Pac-U?
Yeah, so basically a lot of it is a little bit of HR, a little bit of recruitment, trying to get the word out to as many people as possible, and then trying to get your folks that they have the right information, so then they can do their jobs, which means a lot of talking to other people and finagling documents, so then the talent or your crew has the right people to contact or the right information so they can do their jobs productively and succinctly. I think that's the vaguest way of explaining producing.
It's like
yeah.
a crazy mix of like project management and just dealing with people.
Exactly.
At least for Pac-U, we don't have to deal with contracts. I know for like literally a last gig that we did, we have I think 12 members of talent and crew, and just sending them out contracts and then NDAs and then getting them invoicing and payment. That's like 2 whole people's jobs just right there. Not even
Exactly.
doing the broadcast. Like it's insane.
So that's kind of what I've been doing with like assembling people and communicating dates and times to them and then telling them where to go, which is then, so I'm the one who's like wrangling them in, and then I give them over to Sam, who then would run a show with them. If that
Half the
makes
time
sense.
I give them to Uni.
And then you give them to Uni, our tech director. So yeah, if you could walk us through like what are the positions? So you have like what's a tech director, what do they do? What's a producer, what do they do? I feel like that would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah. And I see in chat there's 1 or 2 members of the University of Utah and Space Productions in here, so they're going to troll me hard on this because we debate this a lot.
Love that.
The difference between like so producer, we usually look at that as there's 2 different types of producers. There's the on-set producer and then there's the offset producer. Offset producer is more of what Abby is defining here, of like the project management, wrangling people, making sure people are there and operational, and a lot more of the HR side. And then for the on-site producer, it boils down to more of the person that's not really operating anything. They're literally just in your ear telling you what needs to get done. And so like a lot of times they'll be the guys that are saying, okay, prep scene 3, cut in 3, 2, 1. And then the tech director, which is the role that's actually managing, in this case, vMix, or managing the mixer. They're basically handling all of the program preview, building the scenes, and making sure all the scenes are good and ready to go for broadcast. And they roll with it. And if the show breaks, half the time it's on the tech director to figure out what's wrong with it as quickly as possible. A lot of times there'll be a broadcast engineer. At Space Productions, we usually call it like technical on-site manager. And that's usually just what I call the computer babysitter. They're the people that are making sure that all the technology works. If there's a crisis in the middle of the show, they know exactly what's wrong with it, and they can literally point out, okay, that's a bug we've seen with HDMI 3. HDMI 3 just needs a new cable. I'll go run and get a cable and rewire it immediately. Stay off of these 3 scenes. And that's more of the broadcast engineering. And then you get into a lot more of the roles that Pac-U is doing, where we have graphics operator, and the graphics operator is mostly defined as the person who operates the graphics. In most of our shows with vMix, that entails managing a lot of Excel. So it basically entails filling out an Excel sheet, checking off a couple things, saving it, and then watching it populate on the tech director side. Tech director signs off and says, yeah, that looks good, and then takes it. It's a lot of like managing the tickers that you see on the broadcast, some of the caster lower thirds, any of the flavor text you see, the in-game overlays. When the show gets more complex, it's like player rosters or like League of Legends champion select. That's all done with the graphics operator. It's a lot of work, and a lot of times too, they are the ones that are building the spreadsheets. And as the show levels up in complexity, the spreadsheets can get absolutely insane. And I'll pull up some as we go through this too. Beyond that, we got observers. Observers are basically the cameraman for the game. They're the people that are just flying through the games, jumping from player to player. Without the cameraman, the tech director is basically blind. The tech director is never in the game usually, and they're just watching the feeds that are coming to them. You can have anywhere between 1 or 0, actually. You can have 0 observers, like with Rocket League, where it has the auto-observing features that are pretty good. And then you can have all the way up to, for example, for Fortnite, there's a broadcast that we're working on potentially that would have up to 10 observers. And just managing the crew, keeping those comms clear, and making sure that things are going well requires a very strict chain of command. And sometimes you'll have like sub-directors that will basically mix for like a group of like 5 or 6 of them. And then you'll have another group of 5 or 6 observers, and it goes from there. What's the next role? Casters. I know a lot of people really enjoy being casters. Casters are the front-facing portion of all of this. They are basically the showmen behind the scenes, and in front of the scenes, they are the brand ambassador for everything. And you basically have to pray that they don't say something that they shouldn't. And that's why in Pac-U, we have a very extensive list of do's and don't says for the casters. Gabriel can talk a lot more on that as well. It's pretty nutty.
Yeah, it's literally just dancing around whatever we are and aren't allowed to say based on whatever production it is. For this particular production, it's anything that would have the games as companies clap down on us for whatever reason, because if you're not working directly with them, they get pissy. I mean, if you are working directly with them, they want you to say special things too. So you have that regardless. But aside from that, it is, of course, remaining professional, trying to keep an even view on things, make it entertaining, even when things wouldn't be. It's to make it entertaining, even when watching it without commentary would be completely unentertaining, such as a blowout or something like that.
A lot of times, too, from the tech director position, I view casters as people that fill. Like whenever there's a crisis, it's just like, good luck. You have 10 minutes you need to fill. We can give you like 3 or 4 graphics spruced into it, but that's all you get. Fill for 10 minutes. Go. And that like the longer you can fill for as a caster, the more valuable you are as a caster usually.
That's like final exams, basically. It's just that's your big thing. If you can do that, and for the purposes of this, filling is for when something has either gone wrong or something has been delayed on either the technical side or the player side or whatever it may be, so that the match is not running on time for whatever reason that may be, meaning that you need to basically talk, fill air, fill space, and talk is entertaining to listen to. What I've done in Pac-U, for example, is not only talked about the Pac-U itself, but the upcoming match, what we know about the players or the teams or their programs or that sort of thing. For those that are on teams or involved with the teams, when we asked about information about your players and your teams, that was the purpose, so that we have something to talk about, even not necessarily to fill, though sometimes we'll use it for that, but also so that we can talk about your players on a more personal level and make it a bit more entertaining that way.
Yeah, a lot of it really comes down to how much you can prep as a caster. And sometimes that falls on the tech director, and that falls on the producer to provide that material to them. But the more research you do as a caster, the more room you have to fill, the more information you have to talk about, the more beneficial it is overall.
Yeah.
And a lot of times too, it comes down on the other side too of just figuring out how short you can make things. Like I've had times where we come back from break and like game is ready in a minute. And it's just like, okay, casters, come back, do your announcement, do your pitch, and tell us everything you need to do in a minute or less. And a minute does not sound like sounds like a good chunk of time, but it's like insanely short when it comes to like that broadcast time. That's like the equivalent of basically saying 3 things, passing it to your co-host to say 1 thing, and then it's gone. It's insane. Cool. I think that's pretty much all the roles. There's some specialized ones for like audio engineering, but for productions of this scale, it's not really usually necessary.
Also, audio engineering is less applicable when it comes to remote because there's less you can fiddle with.
Yeah.
Like usually the technical director can realize, okay, that sound is very clearly needing to be turned down or turned up or something like that. But aside from that, they don't actually have many bells and whistles to mess with, unfortunately or unfortunately, for the sake of this broadcast.
Yeah, and there's some roles too that don't really translate from like live productions. For example, like stage manager, like especially with like audio engineer. Like normally you have a front of house audio engineer, just listening and managing the speakers, but you don't have that in this kind of environment, and that's always fun. But you do sometimes have an audio engineer that literally just needs to manage comms if they are complex enough, and that is very, very valuable in an online production.
So listening to you all talk, I'm really getting the sense that there's no specific inroad to production and broadcast, and you kind of need to prepare to be a jack of all trades and try to dabble in different skill sets. And maybe a good guiding point for people interested in it is just to throw yourself into it and try various roles, because I don't think there's any one given. You never know where you're going to end up. Is that kind of a true thing? Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, you can talk about your experience if you want, Sam, but for me, it was largely based on what I wanted to do and what skills developed from it. To give an example on how I came to be, I did have the field kind of where this all belongs. To give to give some context to that, I'm a communications major. Originally, I wanted to do broadcast journalism, but I switched to broadcast production due to sort of some dream jobs at the time that probably won't pan out, but we'll see. Anything can happen. The thing that I went into it for had me needing to learn how to do technical things, how to run things like OBS, how to run a switcher, that sort of thing. And about 2 months in, someone said, hey, we're looking for casters in this club to cover some of our matches. And I was like, okay, why not? That seems fun. That seems like something that can get me closer sights on the sort of things I need to be learning. And so I did that. The person who invited me dropped the school shortly after that, which left me as the sole member of anything broadcast related. And so at that point, I believe Arya came in shortly after that. And then between Arya and myself, we slowly built up, well, not even slowly, it was over the course of a year. We built about a 10-man team to run various games and that sort of thing. And through building up that team, we both kind of became broadcast directors, because ultimately that's what we were. We were directing any number of broadcasts for our different games. And so to bring it back to the question of should you be a jack of all trades, yes, though I wouldn't say that it's absolutely necessary to be one going in. I think that you end up being one, whether you like it or not. You end up learning a lot of things, whether you like it or not, maybe out of necessity, maybe out of just picking it out along the sides. I've learned a lot of technical stuff from Arya and our president at the time that helped us with technical stuff as well, Bobby Belter. Both of them I've learned a bunch of technical stuff from. They were great to learn basically running multiple computer setups at the same time. I had never done that before. I'd never seen that before. And they just walked into my room with a second computer and started hooking stuff in. I was like, oh, that makes sense. and I started grasping those bits. So even if you aren't a jack of all trades at the time, I would say go with the one thing. If you're trying to get into like esports and esports broadcasting, get into the one thing that you want to get into, but keep your eye out on everything else. Don't just hyper focus into your one position. because ultimately the more you know about what your teammates are doing, the more you can be of assistance and also not get in their way. If I know, for example, that Arya needs time to set up like a 2-box or something, set up a box for both myself and someone to remotely plug in, if that needs to happen and we didn't have one set up initially, it's like a surprise or something like that, I know that I need to fill for 5 minutes without Arya telling me that while they build one real quick. Whereas if I hadn't learned that sort of thing, well, they'd have to tell me that, and maybe they forget to tell me that, or maybe they're busy building it and hoping that I just last that long. Any number of things can happen, but things run more smoothly if you know more about the entire process of what you're trying to do as a production.
I guess something I could say, like, for me, when I started doing this, I started out as like a Twitch moderator in high school, was moderating a channel. Slowly became that Twitch channel's editor for YouTube content. Went to college, just joined the esports club, started broadcasting.
Yeah.
And like even as a CS major, like just started doing the technical aspects. Like you said, producing that thing all of a sudden is like a sophomore year when you first brought those computers into your room. I forgot the overlays.
Yeah.
So I literally had to make new overlays in like 5 minutes with Microsoft Paint.
Yeah, and we delayed some stuff, and it was and to give another example of in that scenario, we're also testing out a new way to dampen sound because I was in a dorm room because we ran stuff out of the dorm room. And well, what I did was that I lived in one of those really, really old dorms that still has like exposed piping and stuff like that. And so I thought, well, I felt it up first, and I was like, well, that's sturdy enough. And I hung up 2 blankets on the front and back to essentially make a not green screen and dampen the sound that way. So there's definitely some creative or adaptive prospects on how you're going to go about anything as well, especially if you're trying to build something out from scratch, like we were. Even if you have the starting resources, knowing fundamentally what needs to happen and then coming up with how you're going to do that if you don't have the equipment necessary is another important skill.
When I made those overlays in Paint, since I didn't have a way to get transparency on any of the images, everything that wanted to be transparent, I made green, the green screen color, and just green screen the images.
Yeah, you applied the green screen to the images, and then it technically worked. And we're like, all right, there you go. That's all we need.
Yeah, I think it comes down to really being flexible. I know for my side of the story too, I originally came into it as a graphic designer. My freshman and sophomore year in college were computer science. I found out that I did not have the dedication to devote to learning freaking binary and machine code and doing it all by hand. I was like, can't do this. And then I ended up doing game design, filled in with more of the producer role, figured out I really liked people. But I still had a lot of that tech and dev background. And at least some sort of understanding of how things link up and how things can kind of be coded to create something you want. I know a big project of mine when I was at TESPA was to create data-driven graphics using Photoshop. And my whole goal with that was basically, we had these templates, these scoreboards that we had to do every single week. And I was like, this is horrible. Like, this takes me like literally like 45 minutes or sometimes like an hour and a half to gather the information, do it, and get it done. For a basic scoreboard. And it's like, this is something that's necessary for social media. It's used a lot. Like, I understand why it needs to be done, but this could be so much more efficient. So I looked into like Photoshop scripting and managed to literally start pumping out graphics that used to take like an hour and a half to collect the data and get it done and check it twice and get approval for it. And I managed to do it in 5 to 10 minutes. And it was literally as easy as clicking a button and pulling from like the tournament admin spreadsheets and just going and then getting it approved. So finding these ways to make things more efficient is really what got me really interested in the broadcast side. I've never been on-screen talent. I hate being on-screen talent. I'm the tinkerer at heart of just like really enjoying like the broadcast tech behind it and being and really figuring out what makes things tick and how we can make things more efficient. And that goes to, on the scale of being a project manager as well as being a broadcast engineer. And finding ways to do things for cheap. Whenever I see a low budget for a project, I'm like, okay, this is a challenge. And it's not like we're not cutting features. It's like, okay, how can we minimize the features instead? So it's like we can still do a player interview. It might not be as complex. We might have a little bit of less security on it, but it can still work. Are you willing to take that as a risk as a client? And it's a communal thing where we just have to talk back and forth with like a lot of the technology. I remember a friend of mine when I was working at Blizzard for the internship, they told me that building a not safe broadcast is cheap, but building a broadcast that is safe, reliable, and has redundancies is insanely expensive. Like I've literally recreated the Overwatch League in vMix, and it's like you can do that. Like it works. You can do that off of 3 computers if you really wanted to, but if any of those computers fail, you have lost the entire broadcast. And that's not something that a multi-billion-dollar company can assume as a risk. So building these redundancies in place is a very interesting part of broadcast technology. And sure, you can do a full broadcast from OBS on a single computer and you observe as well, but building those safeties into it is where you really get into the complexities of it and the fun of it. But that's my personal take.
Yeah, you saying you don't like being on-screen talent, but back in like when I first started, I'd be, casting, observing, and producing all at the same time, just sitting there typing the keyboard while I'm talking.
Yep. I remember being a part of, who was it? It was, I can't remember what his name was. Back when the AVGL was doing their first broadcasts and we were working at DreamHack together. The guy, like literally, this is when Stream Decks were like brand new, and I think it was actually an X key. And for perspective, if you guys don't know what a Stream Deck is, it's these little things, and they literally just have buttons. You can use them for like broadcast and OBS and stuff like that too to change scenes really easily. And he literally had an X key on the desk and was casting, and then he would have program and then the next scene or program and preview on the screen, and he would literally just mix between each one of the scenes while he was casting for like a major event. And I'm just like, what is happening here?
Yeah, just have fancy keyboard shortcuts. So is what I used to do. Just knowing hit this button to transition to like from casters to an away screen while you wait for the match to load.
To put that kind of together, just to give it kind of a short thing, basically the more money you have in your production, the safer and easier everything is. It is very, very possible to broadcast on very, very little.
But that does not mean it's better sometimes. At the core,
That's very
broadcast
true.
is narrative, broadcast is story,
Yeah.
and having a story of a bunch of students doing a roughneck crazy thing is sometimes a better story than the Overwatch League, which half the time feels artificial.
It's very true. This is all talking about the technical stuff. I'm more meant the technical stuff. The actual full broadcast, yes, it is about the story that is made in front of you, and that's an entirely other different different ball game altogether. I would say that to give a suggestion in that category, if you're going for the narrative side of things, like casting, or not even necessarily casting, but you're just helping put together the narrative. I've driven this home or tried to drive it home in the Pac-U server, but one of the most important things I think that happens in the background off screen is the assembly of these teams' stories, both with each other and on their own, and their esports programs and their stories on their own in terms of collegiate stuff. Learning all of these things and being able to give it to the casters and help weave a story with them is a position all on its own. So being able to be a creative storyteller in that context, or if you're trying to be a caster, a slight background in drama certainly helps. I have a somewhat accidental background in drama, but I was certainly in no high school drama club or anything like that, but I had enough to get started. And every part, to kind of drive that home, every part of esports can have a different background that's useful. In fact, it has a very wide array of backgrounds that are useful to it. You just have to figure out where it's supposed to be applied.
I would argue that for all of esports too. Like a lot of esports, it's not just like not tournament admin work, it's not just event work. Like that is the main part of it, and esports is a marketing tool for a lot of these corporations. But within each one of these, there is so many roles, it is ridiculous. And underneath broadcast, it's probably about like 30% of the roles. There's a lot that you can do with I would argue that even event production and event production is above broadcast. Because you got to make the event and then you got to showcase the event. there's so many roles you can do of so many different disciplines. There's the whole tournament admin side. There's just making sure managing people, stage management, and a lot of these things are cut down because we don't have live events. I'm so sad, but it's what it is. I literally went from going on a trip in my favorite rocket ship. No, literally a trip to go to, like, I remember I was going like every other week. I was out of the state and I was going to an event after event after event after event after event. And then we came back from PAX East and there was a scare at like PAX East of COVID. And I was like, no more events. And then the whole country shut down like 2 weeks later. And I was just like, there's going to be no more events for like 2 years. And I was like, that was such like a turning point in my like internal like momentum that I had had for such a long time. Because it's like you get to a point where it's like, I'm finally good enough to go to these events. I'm finally good enough to stand at like the PAX East. I'm finally good enough to do dream hacks. And then it just kind of, COVID just stomps that out and it made me really sad. But that's my own internal monologue. I don't know where I'm going with this.
So, though, talking about remote broadcasting, what are some softwares or some what do people need to know? Or like technicalities? Like, what do we think?
I was gonna say you brought up vMix earlier, but some
Yeah,
people
so
know what
might
vMix
not
is.
know what that is. Yeah.
Now you don't even know what vMix is. Just pray the technology works now. vMix. Let me show you it real fast, actually. So I can show. I'm working on a show literally for tomorrow, actually. We're doing the Intel Inspires for AVGL, and we're helping them with their streamer showdown. So this is vMix. vMix is a beautiful piece of technology. It does cost a decent chunk of change, but it is pretty much industry standard for online broadcast right now. There's a whole bunch of different tools you can get to help build it out. And when it comes to live production, hardware is always more beneficial to software, which is why you don't see vMix used very often in a live event setting. But it works very, very well in an online setting where you can have like 6 copies of vMix loaded up in the cloud somewhere, and they just basically feed all into one another and they have redundancies. So if the computer crashes, you're fine. But vMix, it's great. It's dandy. How it basically works here is, I was talking about preview and program earlier. On your left here is preview, and that's basically what you're prepping for the scene. This is what's going to go to program, and program is basically whatever's being sent to your stream. And everything on the right here is program. Down here, can you see my mouse? Yeah, you can see my mouse. Perfect. Bottom left here, you can see a lot of the inputs. So these are all the scenes, all of the things that are built out. Hi, you can see me down here. And each one of these scenes has their own layers of complexity. For example, I don't want to cut to it because then you guys are gone and I can't show you my screen. But when you cut to this, there's whole levels of like triggers. So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, like scripting. And I know someone said in chat they were interested in this kind of stuff. It's basically an if statement that says, if this happens, do this function with these parameters, essentially. And you can do some really cool stuff with this kind of, with vMix. And this one's like really basic. This basically says that when it comes in, we're going to turn off the background. We're going to turn on the background music, and then when it goes out, we're going to turn off the background music, and we're going to turn on the casters, or turn off the casters when we go here. And then we have the caster scene, whereas the reverse triggers where the casters are going to get turned on. Phrasing. Beyond that, there's all sorts of really cool stuff. You can do data-driven graphics. So like if you're looking here, I can come in here and do, let's change the name of the first name, player 1 and player 2. So OBS does something similar to this as well, but with vMix, I can also link these up to all sorts of data sources. So I can come in here and link it up to like a Google Sheet. I can link it up to a JSON, an RSS, just a text file, an XML, Excel. All of these things have their own pros and cons to them. I won't go too much into depth to that, but I can basically operate a spreadsheet or on a different computer, which then can save and then update this leaderboard. So while the tech director is jumping around between things in games and managing a lot of the stuff for the actual game itself, the graphics operator on the side can come in here and prep the leaderboard, give it to the person, and then make sure that it's ready to roll for them. And it just takes a lot of that offloading. So the tech director isn't bogged down, has so much roles that he just is overwhelmed. Yeah, this is vMix. Other software I'm sure you all know is like OBS, for example. OBS is the free version of this. It's always compared between vMix and OBS, that basically for OBS, it allows you to do anything under the sun. You just have to know how to program it. With vMix, it has a lot of out-of-the-box features that are very, very good. So you don't need to know as much of like a heavy scripting and programming base. Yeah. Beyond that, there's some custom solutions and custom software that people will use for live events. But these are pretty much the two main, what they're called is like vision mixers. And that's what vMix stands for, basically changing between program and preview and prepping scenes and building scenes. These are the two ones for online broadcast.
Personally using OBS, I would specifically like use the drawing thing like key names on the overlays. I just have it reach my text file that have a separate program I made myself to write to them. So specific in this best situation, I just have a button like the teams are backwards. I just hit a single button and it swaps all the names and team scores for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, having the CS degree is great.
Yeah, and
You
that
can write
being
your own programs.
and that's yet another background that can be useful. If you know how to program things just off the cusp, you can make things for OBS, since that's kind of its specialty, that you can technically do anything as long as you know how to program it. There you go. That's computer science.
Yeah, and don't be disgruntled too. There are so many add-ons for OBS; it's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, other people have done the work. It's okay.
Advanced scene switches, little old DVD logo idle screens you can make with I found online. So many useful things you can just find if you're willing to just put in the work to find them.
Yeah, all of these, like, the thing that I really like about vMix too is it has full training videos for literally every single feature you could possibly imagine. Like, you don't need to know vMix. If you sit in and watch, like, I think it's like close to like 100 videos, you will be a master of vMix at the end of it. And it's insane how good the documentation is for vMix. Oh yeah, Streamlabs OBS is always good for personal production and broadcasting. Abby just talked about it in chat. I've used it once for like an actual professional broadcast, where like you want to have like the Twitch notifications come in, and Streamlabs does that very, very well.
And then, so we've talked about like, so vMix with OBS, Streamlabs, and then communication. So not Discord all the time, maybe Discord, but then also TeamSpeak, which is, I don't know how to explain, basically Discord, but built different.
Better.
Better.
It's less of the community side of Discord and more of just like, these are voice comms. Take it or leave it.
Yes. So TeamSpeak is really helpful, especially if you have a producer and you have your talent. Ways of communication. So it's quiet while they can watch the stream or the play that's happening. Yeah, Thomas says slobs, myself. Definitely good for people with one screen. Yeah, so these are basically, we're just giving you all a bunch of resources. And again, like I said, this is such an individualistic journey that you can pick and take what you personally need. Or if you help with Pac-U, you'll see what we use personally. But definitely there's lots of options out there. I also mentioned Google Suite. And then Parsec was also something that Sam taught me about. As someone, we were talking about background, someone who was originally an esports host and now is on this other side learning about the technical part of it, is really helpful and part of the show, 100% of the show, literally.
A lot of times the casters get stuck in this nice bubble too.
Yes, it was like, a beautiful bubble.
The casters don't need to know all the back end.
I was protected, and now I know way too much now, but I couldn't not, good stuff. So then I feel like, again, I worked for the Overwatch League's Vancouver Titans and then CLG as an interviewer. And my experience was mostly, again, standing on camera, talking, being able to talk to people, but I think definitely learning about the production side of it, I think makes your empathy even stronger for your crew. Which again, as talent, will want to work with you more because you're going to understand what your crew is going through and you're not going to be, as Sam said, in that bubble. So yeah, Parsec was really, I think also really helpful for remote. I don't know, Sam, you could probably elaborate on this more, but I think for remote broadcasting, it's really neat.
Yeah, I would say Parsec was even industry standard before COVID hit. It's really useful for when people have really, for lack of a better term, shit tops, which is like horrible computers that they just need to get fixed. And they can't run games on them, but they still want to be an observer. So for example, for Utah Esports, a lot of times since we went to pure remote and a lot of our people had to move like across the country, we just brought in Parsec. So we have what I like to call a log cabin. And it's basically a whole bunch of our computers pieced up together. Like literally, I wish I could take my camera, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 computers just like encircling me. And it's basically, I took the broadcast studio home. Rest in peace, my poor electrical bill. But from there, it allows us to still do all of the hardwired solutions without any of the like kind of remote broadcast complexities and insecurities. Like if someone has dial-up speeds are like sub like 5 megabytes up and down, all of a sudden they can't observe because they can't encode it as those speeds effectively to get to us, or they can't stream their feeds to us to capture them on our side. But with this setup, it just means that your feed would be a little bit grainy. And it means that you can still do full OBS, you can do a full vMix, and basically we prep the workstations and we prep the computers for you. You just press connect, and then boom, you are on the computer and it is ready to rock and roll. You don't need to install any special software on your side. The computers are good and it's easy. It's very nice to have a nice remote workstation that you can just log into.
Awesome. I was wondering, since we've been talking now for almost 45 minutes, do we want to do questions, like specific questions people have?
Sure.
I was wondering if that might be nice.
Yeah, don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. Also, John, I'm working on that right now. If you wondered why my eyes keep darting away while I'm speaking, I'm writing out a doc with all this for y'all. So yes.
I'll say a big thing too for while we're getting questions in here, feel free to ask them, is flexibility. You just need to be able to learn things on the fly very quickly. And you need to be able to have enough of an acquaintance of how the system should work that you can ask critical questions to figure out how they work with a new system. A good example is like literally today, I've been used to using Discord and TeamSpeak in all of my environments for communications. I got slapped with this protocol. It's called Agent IC. And like literally, like, here, let's see if my camera will focus. It's literally a phone app. And I'm like, excuse me? So I had to come in here, download this app, which wasn't on iOS. So I had to freaking boot my, anyways, the whole thing, I had to quickly come in here, but I understand the basics of how team communications work, and that there's levels, there's tiers of it, and that people should communicate directly with one another, like how to DM people with voice, stuff like that. And I was able to ask critical questions to get online with that new software within 5 to 10 minutes.
I got
Oh, go ahead.
first, Gabe. Okay.
Oh, I was just going to answer the first bit, was that the use of TeamSpeak is essentially first of all, you get the application TeamSpeak. That's a simple Google search and a download. But after you have that, typically you log into a server, and to log into a server, you need a TeamSpeak link, which for us is given as a quick link by a website made by our technical director. Yes.
Yes, that was
the
for Uni.
right term for Uni. Yeah.
TeamSpeak also has like a lot of really good features to it. Like if anyone's ever done like EVE Online rating, the best way to do it is how I explain it is that basically you have your lieutenant, and then you have a whole bunch of squadrons underneath you. And the same thing kind of applies to production, where it's like you could have teams of observers, you could have your graphics, you could have your casters. And TeamSpeak, instead of hopping into each one of the channels like you do with Discord, it allows you to press a button on your Stream Deck, on your keyboard, on your mouse, and communicate directly with them. And you can also have multiple accounts. So I can have a listener, and I always colloquially name them like Sam's ear, Sam's toe, Sam's finger, or something like that, and put them in each one of the channels just to listen in on comms, and I'll mute and deafen them on my side. But if I wanted to listen in on the casters really quick, I could just unmute it. If I want to talk to them really quick, I just press a button, but I can also hear everything in my own channel. So it's very good to have tiered and layered communications in TeamSpeak.
The first time I ever had the opportunity to use Parsec, I was just pulling it as an emergency producer for an actual like major esports event. I literally like never used it before, never like even knew about it. Really, just downloaded it, had it up and running in like 5 minutes.
It's so nice too, because like I literally, like for our show this past weekend, our replay operator's power went out 5 minutes into the show, and I'm just like, are you kidding me? But because we had Parsec built up, like I was able to come in there and just press a button, connect to his terminal, his workstation, and that was on my network. So he lost power, he was unable to operate it, but the workstation was still there. So I was able to connect to it and instantly have replays up within like probably 5 minutes.
Then we started using Parsec. It was just not wanting to work for like whatever reason, just being real studies. Had to stop using it after like 5 minutes of broadcast and switch to Discord screen share.
Yeah, I've had people like literally like capture feeds using Parsec, and I'm like, what are you doing? I was like, there's better ways to do this. Like, let me teach you, please, please, please. Like I think the beauty of production too is you can come in with the jankiest solutions, and if it works, and that's all that matters. It's insane, and it's a lot of fun. we have another question?
So what
Specific software.
yeah, specific software. So like walking through, so like, all right, here it is, y'all. I'm giving it. So I am the almighty, I'm omniscient sim maker. You are all in my little creation. It is call time. It is 5 p.m. It is an hour before stream starts. What's happening? What's gonna happen before we can start that stream at 6?
First, you pray that everyone shows up, and you wrangle all the staff. I double check everything, and then after that, it comes down to making sure everyone's on their workstations, everyone's comfortable. I know for Utah Esports, we had literally checklists. They were used to be binders on desks, but now they're Excel spreadsheets where you just go through and you literally check off every single thing, make sure it's good, make sure everything's working, because things can change. You restart a computer, the default audio is different, and now all of a sudden the observer's not getting audio and the tech director could miss it. There's whole problems. But if you just go through each one of the checklists, a common one for observers is to go through each one of the key bindings. A tech director is to make sure all his inputs are clean, that this run of show is very understandable and they know what's going to happen. And yeah, casters is mostly show up, get your link to connect, make sure your feed is clear, make sure they're receiving a clear feed, and then you're good to go. Yeah, I would say those are probably 3 or 4 main roles for getting it going, unless you want to go into like specific software.
I was saying, like, yeah, in terms of the technical stuff that you need aside from a camera and mic, that's like that's the hardware, sure. Obviously, you need the computer you're logging into any sort of software with as well. In terms of the software, you need to be able to have TeamSpeak. Typically, you're communicating through Discord, which you probably already saw. Depending on what you're also doing, like assuming you're just being a caster, that's mostly all you need. But if you need to be monitoring something else, like or heck, if you're just curious as to how it's all sounding, you typically help run a sound test on yourself, like Sam was saying, is it sounding correct? Is there any background noise? Is it sounding too echoey? What can we do to change that? You have a whole hour to do this, so you don't have an excuse for not trying to make it as perfect as possible. It will never be perfect, and it will look like a horrendous cluster of everything wrong with the world on your end. But on the other end, hopefully it looks amazing.
You say a full hour, but sometimes a full hour is not enough. Shit.
That's true. It's very true.
And you're like, okay, we're doing half the show now. Good luck.
Yep. No. That's and sometimes that's just how it is. You hope that an hour is enough, and most of the time it is, but the failures will always stick out more than the successes, so it will not feel that way. And don't worry too much if things don't look like they're running perfectly, because typically, and this does tie into knowing more about the jobs that your team is doing, but typically everyone is trying to get something done. If you set them on the right path from a director position, or even if you are just one of those people trying to get something done, you need to be able to trust that the rest of your team is also getting something done, and that your directors, if you yourself are not a director, are making sure that all the gears, all the cogs, all of them, all the people are moving in the way they need to be.
Don't be afraid to interrupt too. I find a lot of times for like new crews, people will kind of like meekly sit there, like the overlay could be wrong, and everyone will just kind of sit there, wait for like a calm in the storm. There's no calm in the storm.
Nope.
Like just clearing that up now, like especially when you're in the games, it's basically, especially in online broadcast, if you don't have tally lights, and for people that don't know, tally lights are basically you have it's either green, yellow, or blue, or green, yellow, or off essentially usually. And it's basically, are you being previewed, are you live, or are you just not even being considered at all? And if you don't have that, then a lot of times it's literally the tech director saying, observer 1, you're live, prepping observer 2, going to observer 2 in 3, 2, 1, prep a wide shot. And it's just like, it's a lot of like communication and going back and forth. So if you interrupt, make sure that it's quick, concise, and brief. And if you can't interrupt in a concise manner, then it's just going to get lost. Like a lot of times people will come in and be like, I think the overlay might be wrong. Like that's not critical feedback. Even saying the overlay is wrong is not critical feedback. Instead, you should say the left team should be University of Utah, the right team should be ASU, and the flags are wrong. And then that's immediate work that people can go and basically be like, okay, we can fix that right now, without disturbing much of the flow.
Yeah, and that being said, that interruption might be an issue as well, but you do need to keep things moving if at all possible. Like you were saying, like hopefully whatever you're doing doesn't disrupt the show very much. Like for example, if the caster's in the middle of casting, typically, like I've mentioned it on scene like once or twice to clarify for the viewer like if it's like the names are flipped, for example, I will clarify that just so it's not just too disorienting for the viewer or any more than it is for the caster. And if it's not fixed by the time you have already said it, then they'll get your team will get the audio feedback as well.
Yeah, but please do not, as a caster, do not point down every single problem.
Oh, of course
I
not.
see this a lot when there's like a tech director that becomes a caster. They'll be like, "Oh, the feed's lagging," and I'm like, "No, don't say that. Like, we're working on fixing that. That's something that the observer can see. You do not need to point that out."
Yeah. No.
Or like
just
the subtle errors, but like when it like the narrative-driven errors, like you're talking about, with like the
Yeah.
overlay might be flipped. That's very reasonable to discuss, and that half the time that gets queued off of us, and we're able to figure that out very quickly. Yeah. Didn't mean to get defensive about that. I just had a.
Oh, no.
Who
I
was
get
pointing
you.
shit out, and I'm just like, calm down.
Stop,
Let me do
please.
it. Let me do it.
We've got it. Yeah, no. The only stuff you should point out, because again, the caster is that narrative role, right? So as long as anything that you see wrong, quote unquote, as long as none of that's disrupting the narratives, not your problem. Don't worry about that. So that is someone else's problem.
Yeah, a very valuable role for a caster too is being able to have someone in your ear, and you still be able to talk. And it's like you can still, like, the tech director will keep it brief, but being able to say we're going to this next scene. There's a technical error here. We're going to skip over this in the run of show. And you as a caster still being able to talk coherently while they're in your ear is a very difficult thing, but it is a very valuable skill.
Yeah, especially and the most often when wow, that was terrible sentence structure. When it is that is most important when things are going wrong, because typically the technical director, whoever is talking in your ear, has more to say, and you need to keep talking usually as well. So during that crunch time is when that's most important, though they will be talking in your ear just as part of the natural course of things as well. And being able to talk and not delay visibly when you hear it is very important, because the audience is not hearing your technical director, which means you're just pausing weirdly. And at the very beginning,
flip side too, as a TD, you could have you have the casters in your ear almost the entire time.
Yeah, if you're a TD,
like you have to literally listen to the casters the entire time, listen to comms, listen to your producer, listen to the observers, and then still be giving commands to yourself. And a lot of, like, from my personal experience, it's managing the levels correctly.
I was going to say that,
turning people down and making sure that they are correct.
That's a lot easier also in an actual studio, because typically the sound from the observers comes from that direction. The sound from your producer comes from that direction. Like, it's not all of it coming in through your left and right ear.
I can't tell you how many times I miss just being in a studio and the observers are like having their cute little banter back and forth, and they're like coordinating with one another. They're screen looking across one another, and it's like you don't get that in an online broadcast because you just have to communicate everything. They can't see your screen. I mean, there's ways to technical tools to resolve that, but 90% of the time they cannot see your screen, and that's so difficult.
As I say, I've never even
so hard.
I am your junior, so I've never even gotten to actually use a studio for an esports broadcast, but I know what I'm missing. I can see every single time I see something as I'm learning in college, like about broadcast production. I'm like, God, I wish I had that.
Same.
Instead of being like, oh, just plug in another HDMI monitor, plug in another monitor, we can use that one right there. It's, oh shit, we got to get another feed up. We gotta take more bandwidth up, and you got to download it, and then it's a whole fiasco. And if it's hard.
Yep. But this too shall pass, as is said, and we'll have one back eventually.
And also talking about, you're in chat talking about like resources, like where do I learn more about this? Like it's like, oh, we need.
Oh yeah, that's right. I was about to say something about that actually. Yeah, was that there's a lot of resources online if you're just looking up basic stuff. But in terms of the individual things that I've seen be very, very useful for casters, since it is a very narrative point of view, I have found actually that the most important bits of feedback that I've learned has actually been of interviews of casters. When people interview the casters for like I don't know, some sort of production to humanize them or something like that, whatever it may be. Anytime casters for sports or esports or anything are interviewed, they will tell you that experience. And the experience is extremely important because that's what you're trying to give off to your audience. Every single one of them will tell you that, is that your experience in viewing it and showing you that narrative in your head and conveying it to other people, that is what every single one of them will tell you. And just the little nuances is the sort of thing you want to listen for. As for directing, technical directing, whatever form of directing you need to be doing, there are multiple sometimes depending on the size of the broadcast. I have found that an excellent one to kind of dive into the deep end on looking on what a massive scale production can be. Weirdly, Monday Night Football covers their stuff a lot in the behind the scenes footage. There's a lot of videos online on their behind the scenes footage of actually listening to audio of the technical director, or rather technical director getting feedback from producers and observers. It's like this person says, oh, I have a great scene on 4. Okay, ready 4 now, or switch to 4, or whatever they want, whatever they say for their particular thing. So directors have a lot of
resources.
Yeah, I
would
know
say
how to
too,
lag in
like
there.
a lot of almost all the experience I get, like sure I read like sports video group and I read like all this stuff and I'm part of a lot of different communities and like all that is very, very valuable. But the best way to do it is literally just bounce around between crews. Don't get
That too,
stagnant.
yeah.
Just keep on going from crew to crew to crew, and everyone does things differently. And be like, once again, it's that same thing that I was talking about with like voice comms. It's like if they're using something completely different, asking the critical questions on how to get up to speed for that. And half the time when they're just teaching you how to get up to speed, they'll teach you how they built it. And you're just like, cool, I can take this and use it for my own. And like, they're usually 90% of the time they're okay with it. A lot of people in production sometimes are like, it's trade secrets, it's all mine. Like, I don't want to share it with any of you. And it's just like,
Nice Gollum voice.
our process. Yeah, it's a lot of times like it's the same thing. It's like behind the scenes, it's secret. People like,
Yeah.
they care about it a lot. Like it's their babies half the time. And even if they don't want to share it, like because trade secrets, it's something that they built a lot of time on. And as long as you realize that and approach it respectfully, people are willing to share it with you most of the time.
And half the time also, if you're I've never seen a universal name for this skill, but being good at looking up exactly what you're looking for on Google, having the right having the right having the right keywords to find what you're looking for. There are so many sources online, so many people among us have put themselves out there on the internet to learn from, and most of it is free. There's some that is not, but usually it's because they're trying to make money off of it. It's not always that it is better, though oftentimes you can get more bang for your buck if you put in any bucks at all. That being said, make sure you do your research ahead of time. A lot of it is research, and not just broadcast either. Just researching your field, becoming more knowledgeable in it. Showing up to the table prepared is one of the biggest breaths of fresh air anyone can have when you first walk up to their table. Like if you show up as a caster and just kind of slide in and know exactly what is expected of you immediately. If you slide in as a technical director, usually the people surrounding the technical director are nervous because it's a new tech director. They're that's the crux of your operation right there, and they're new. So being able to slide in and be able to ask all the critical questions and be brought up to speed 5 to 10 minutes, like Sam was saying, being able to be brought up to speed on the nuances of, okay, we're technically using this program. Okay, how do I do this, this, and this? Then that's it. So long as you know how to do those things, just being able to slide into a production and have as little friction as possible is a very, very, very valuable trait.
There's a quote from Adam Savage that I think applies very well to broadcast as well. But he says the only difference between messing around and science is documentation.
Yeah.
And it applies very, very well to broadcast. The only difference between like a solo broadcast and like not a super professional broadcast and a very professional broadcast is the level of documentation. The more like what's called signal flows and the more layouts you can have of like where every single cable goes where, so that when shit goes wrong, you know exactly where to fix it, the better it is. And that goes all the way through for casters, where it's like as much information. Like literally, I just built a whole caster book, or a whole book for our whole broadcast production that has links to every single vMix link, every single RTMP link, where to pull it, where to send it to, where the observers need to be sending it to, what they're going to be, if they're a wide observer, if they're going to be a close-up observer, stuff like that. The more, because the larger the crew gets, the less time in that hour before and those rehearsals that you have to convey to people. Because you can sit there and I can explain everything to the full 10-man crew, but it's going to take me 5-6 hours. But if I write it all down, then people will be able to read it, digest it, and ask critical questions of it instead of me just lecturing.
Yeah. All right. And so we have reached kind of our end of our hour. So that basically means we have no more time for questions, but thank you so much to everyone for coming out today. And basically, so we're here to plug also, as Sam also said, jumping on crews and shadowing people. If you wanted to, there is a chance, and if you are a part of a Pac-U school this weekend and next weekend, we will be doing broadcasting and, like I said, shadow opportunities. So if you would like to post in the Discord, we have a channel that's called Looking for Crew. And if you could state what game, we are currently doing Rocket League, Overwatch, and League of Legends, and what position you're interested in shadowing, that would be super duper awesome. And maybe we could slide you in the next 2 weeks. You can get real boots in the ground experience. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming out. If everyone wants to plug, can you pass the link to Discord? Yes, I can. And if everyone else wants to plug anything they'd like to plug before we end. Gabe?
Not particularly. I mean, I have social media, but I barely use social media because it's a heated environment and I don't need that for the most part. I use it for like business stuff and for the sake of chatting to people directly. So if you send me a message, I'll find it and I'm willing to chat with anyone about just about anything. I like just talking about whatever because I enjoy chatting with people, but mostly on an individual and small group level. I'm not willing to just post what I had for breakfast or my particular political affiliations, that sort of thing. It's just, no.
That feeling when I just posted my coffee last morning and a week ago
Iconic, Sam.
like literally, like, you just added me so hard.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want that mess. I don't want the potential mess, rather.
Take a stance.
No. If you want my stance, DM me. I'll take it.
He does hit a very valuable point. Actually, having a professional Twitter and a personal
yeah,
Twitter is very
no,
important.
I post about the sort of stuff that I'm doing on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever. I'll post stuff about what I'm doing on there. But in terms of like how I'm feeling about life, the most I will post on a social media post is usually like sympathetic or humanitarian. That's about it.
Anyway, let's close this
And
out.
mine's pretty empty too, just to keep things professional.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you really want to talk to us directly. Don't try looking through our social media feeds. You're not gonna find very many interesting things.
Esports lives on Twitter. Like like if you guys do not have a Twitter right now, you need to get a Twitter. Even if you are just a creeper. Yeah. If you are just a creeper, if you are doing any kind of broadcast, take a picture of yourself in front of a monitor and say, "I'm doing Pac-U, it's great." And that's it. And you will get engagement. And it takes a long time to build it up correctly.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyways, as I'm preaching about social media, you can follow me at twitter.com/SSamMorris_SP.
So yeah,
SP
I'll post
stands
mine
for
too.
Space Productions. My LinkedIn is also on there if you guys want to connect and ask me any kind of critical questions. Business email as well, all that good stuff. Shout out to Space Productions. Follow us at, I'll do another follow, at SpaceProd_GG. We're not posting a lot of stuff very active, but we do post for any kind of job postings. If you're really interested in getting into it, we accept students, and our huge mantra is educating people and educating students specifically, and helping to create a pipeline from collegiate to professional broadcast environments. So keep a lookout and make sure to follow us.
And please, like I said, if you're interested in Pac-U, the Discord is right there. And if you're in the introductions, you can say you're interested in broadcasting, and then I can offer you the broadcasting permission, so then you can be our broadcasting channels. But yeah, that is it. We want to end tonight. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you to the panelists for taking their time. We really appreciate it. And keep on the lookout for more of these sessions. We plan on doing these on a more regular basis. So engage with us on Discord. Drop us a line. Let us know what you want to learn about. Let's just keep the dialogue going, and we'll create more of these sessions, matching up experts to your interests. So keep on plugging away, and we appreciate it. Be safe, y'all. Be well, and have a good evening.
Awesome.
Have a nice night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Spoken like a true caster.
Trevor?